share it on the group. So that's about the introduction about the event. A little bit about the Systems Mapping Academy. So I'll give a brief overview and then Fabian, of course, will let us know more in detail. So they empower people to better understand the complexities that surround them and to make better decisions for a sustainable and just future. Some of the services they offer are training and capacity building, system mapping as a service, and lastly, the process development. From Systems Mapping Academy, we have Fabian Gampp, who's joining us. He is a systemic designer, facilitator, and innovation leader with over 15 years of experience helping organizations navigate complexity and drive meaningful change. He has led more than 100 workshops across sectors and worked with organizations including UNDP, GIZ, Google, Wikimedia, and government agency. So, as co-founder of Systems Mapping Academy and a senior transformation manager with the German government's digital service, Fabian specializes in translating systems thinking into practical tools that helps teams gain clarity, alignment, and innovate solution to complex challenges. So, with that, help me welcome Fabian to the workshop. Thank you, Fabian, for taking time and doing this. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, time to jump on the board. We'll share the link to the board in the chat box and do a bit of warm up. So, here's the, yep, even Fabian has shared it. So, we'd love to know where you're joining us from today. So, pick one of these dots from the panel and place it on this world map and let us know where you're joining us from. And also, what's your experience with systems mapping? Are you a beginner or you're an expert or anything in between? So yeah, place these dots in two places on the map and the horizontal bar. Let's take a minute to do that while we still have more people joining in. Awesome. So far we have people from the West. I'm sure there are people from the East as well. Still joining, they're still voting. I mean, placing their dots. And then we have experience levels somewhere in between beginner and expert. Awesome. A lot of us from Europe. Okay. Yeah, the size of the dots can be huge. All right. I think you can continue letting us know about the location where you're coming from and your experience level while I request Fabian to guide us through the rest of the wonderful session that is designed. Over to you, Fabian.
Yeah, thank you from my side. It's really great to be here and yeah, to have these roughly 2 hours together with you to have a look at system mapping and yeah, in the context of design. Yeah, maybe also adding on what you have already heard about the System Mapping Academy. Actually, we are also, or I'm coming also from a background of design. And at some point, I don't know, 2021, I was wondering what is the next, how can we address more complex issues, which I was facing, especially in the international relationship work I was doing. And so I started to look for methodologies and also approaches there, and came across system thinking and system mapping, and that's where I also met Gian, my co-founder here, and who has basically the knowledge in the system thinking field as he was studying system dynamics. And so System Mapping Academy is basically trying to bring together design perspective with the system perspective and make system mapping more easy to yeah, to get started with and to dive into. So yeah, and that's basically what the session is all about. I will share my screen and show you what we have planned for you today. Yeah, we have two parts. There's a bit of an introduction part from my side for everyone who's new to system mapping or hasn't had a touch point with the methodology yet. And then I will give you an overview about the process we at the System Mapping Academy have developed. And we also have developed a toolkit for Miro itself. And this is also the basis for today where we are working with. And so I will lead you through different steps. And we also have one exercise, a small mapping exercise. Yeah, I don't know, around 45 minutes, something like this, where you then can join a group and map one topic for a couple, yeah, for around 20 minutes. So we also try to make it a bit interactive here. But of course, the topic of system thinking and system mapping is a quite a big one. So we will not get into the depth of every aspect of it, but the aim for today is to give you an overview and a feeling for what system mapping can do, maybe also in your projects. So let me just look at the experience level. That's also really interesting to see. Yeah, so we have a quite a diverse group here. If you have any questions in the meantime, so we will have a bit of a Q&A in the end or after the break. But if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or we have also kind of a parking lot thingy here where you can put the open questions. Also, yeah, bear with us. We are quite a lot of people, so we will not be able to answer everything. But I think most of the questions we will try to cover. All right. So with that, I would say let's get started into the topic of system mapping and also see the relation to design a bit. And I will try to use this feature of presentation for my role. It should work. Let me just see. Maybe can someone give me a thumbs up? Does it look good for you on your side? Perfect. All right. So system mapping. What is this actually? Yeah, so for us as System Mapping Academy, the definition is as follows. So somehow it's a visual language, I think, and we really like this metaphor of a language for complex systems. So it gives you the tools and the visualization elements to structure and visualize relationships, also causal relationships in that case, and understand what happens and why in the system. So it's really a tool for understanding and diving deeper into one topic if you are confronted with a complex challenge. So it's a lot about understanding, also a bit in the end about thinking, creating new ideas or interventions and so on, finding leverage points. But it really comes from this understanding um, approach in the beginning. For us in the during the last years, it became more and more clear that also it's about narrative, about stories, about telling to other people the complexity of a system. And with that, maybe also create more alignment between people, challenge assumptions, and so on. And yeah, last but not least, it's also about identifying leverage. So fields in the system or areas in the system where we maybe can get active and change something or bring new aspects into the system to improve it. And as we are here, most of the people, I assume, coming from the design field or innovation, consulting, or these directions or NGOs, I brought you this graphic, which is from created by Jones and Van Petter, which I really found, yeah, insightful. And we adapted it a bit. But I think, especially if you're coming from design, it's interesting to get the idea of where these systemic approaches of design are sitting, let's say, in the whole story of design or in work. So you have basically design as a craft where it's really about creating products like advertising, packaging, and so on. Then we have creating experiences like services. Um, and um, more and more in this graphic, you see that the complexity is basically rising. So if you have not only one product or one service, but whole organization or industries you want to work with, there maybe service design can be located. But if we are really looking at complex systems, we are, yeah, it's more here you can speak about maybe systemic design or system-aided approach to design, where it's then really about bringing communities together. I don't know, in the international relationship field, for example, a lot of stakeholders working on really huge topics which are influencing communities around one country. And so it's kind of the scale is quite big. But these graphic also shows that it's not easy to place these things. So also service design, you could say, it's already depending on the project, super complex undertaking in some cases, and so it just should show that the system mapping and systemic design approaches are more and more located in complex projects, but yeah, can also be service design, other approaches here. And to show a bit the difference what service design is doing and what systemic design approaches are more focused on, you could say that service design is mainly, let's say you are designing for one service, for one sector in the system, and you map out the touch points and also what is on the backstage level, what are people, for example, what are needed for creating a car sharing app, who is involved, maybe the municipality is involved, maybe the user and the city itself, and so on. So you have the different actors to create a good experience for the user. But it's mainly focused on a good user experience, let's say. And this is a bit of a difference if we are speaking about system mapping, that it's not only about the user from the perspective, it's more the getting the understanding of how everything works together. So it's not only the service in the center, which maybe you want to design, but it's also everything around it, and to understand the implications of all these things influencing the service or influencing the challenge you want to address. So I would argue that it's using system mapping, it's a bit broader than, for example, user journey mapping and all these methodologies which we mainly use in service design or strategic design. It looks a bit broader and it's more focused on understanding and less on creating a better experience for the user. And maybe typically would be that there are more stakeholders also involved from a broader field. So these are the two aspects which I wanted to show you to get a kind of an idea where system mapping is kind of located from our side. And there are, of course, a lot of approaches to visualizing complexity out there. And for example, you have the stock and flow diagrams, which are also coming more from system thinking. You have ecosystem maps where it's really about the stakeholders or the actors in the system and their relationships. So you map out how this person or this organization is related to this organization and what they maybe exchange and how do they like each other or not, or do they have a conflict and so on. So this is really focused on stakeholders and organizations. There are, for example, giga maps, which are bringing together a lot of different visualization types to create a big holistic picture. And there are causal loop diagrams, which are initially also coming from system dynamics and system thinking. And this is actually the ground methodology we today want to have a look on, and also which we are using as at the System Mapping Academy mostly in our projects. So today, you could tell, or you will find people that say these are all system maps. So system maps is a bit of a vague term, let's say. So it's not 100% defined. If we now speak about system maps, we are speaking about causal loop diagrams for today. And as I said in the beginning, 2 hours, it's not enough time to give you or to make you a really practitioner in system mapping or causal loop diagramming, but it can give you a bit of an insight into what it means and a first experience. And so we will touch upon topics, but can't go into depth in all of them. So just as a teaser here, what this language of complexity, so this system mapping is consists of. And if you are starting to map out a system, of course, there are things in the system like forces and drivers which are at play in the system, which you want to understand better. And these are called variables in the system thinking world and the system mapping world. This also is based in the mathematical history of the causal loop diagram. And you could say these elements, these variables, are the nouns of the language. So here in that example, which is from COVID pandemic in 2020, 2021, you see that there are like susceptible people, the number of infections, the infected people, and people exposed to the virus. So the forces and drivers at play. But system mapping is this is basically the foundation of the maps, but then you of course have the interrelationships between all these things. And you see there you have the plus and minus, you have dotted lines and the connections, and also feedback loops are shown. And from our perspective, these causal connections, which you now see here, are kind of the verbs of this language of complexity. So you have the nouns, which says, okay, these things are there, and the verbs, which are telling you how they are interrelated. These are kind of the arrows. And then there are the plot lines, the feedback loops. So kind of the bigger dynamics, causal chains, which have a big influence on the dynamic of the system. And yeah, so you see, these are basically the elements out of which causal loop diagram system map is consisting of. And later on, you will have the possibility to play around with these elements, and I will also dive into a bit of more detail what this is all about. Just to give you a bit of an example also, which you can explore later on, there are some case studies which you can where you see how system maps can look like, and they are quite can look like differently. And just as a glimpse of what the results could be, or how a system map could be visualized, shortly two examples here. One is from our work with the UNDP, where it was about productive sustainable landscapes in Peru. And here you see already there are different areas in the system. There are a lot of interrelationships. And you could, in this tool, which is Kumu, maybe some of you already know it. It's a tool for, yeah, basically displaying system maps. And here you can then dive into, and you see how things like agricultural expansion, for example, has an influence on the forest cover loss, and what this then means for the indigenous communities and what they struggle with in their reality, and what they are trying to change in the system in order to yeah, let the inhabited where they are living to be not destroyed. And so in the end, these system maps are really telling you stories about a system. In that case, it was more like an ecological topic, but of course also with a lot of political aspects and economical aspects to it. This is one example. Another example looks totally different, but has the same methodology in the background. It's just a different structure. This system map is about well-being of youth in Romania, like in the city of Cluj in in that case. So it's more like a system is bounded to has the boundary of a city. And here you can see different aspects how youth are, what the well-being is influenced by. And here, for example, we have created also a bit of stories like of different people in the city and how they are experience all the things which are happening. So here you see that there are the interrelationships or the relationships they have with friends and with their parents is highly influencing the mental health. Also, self-trust is a big issue. Also, nutrition comes in. So, as the well-being term is so broad, we even have economic situations, learning, and so on. All these things are kind of feeding together and then influencing his mental health. And I just wanted to show you that there are different kind of visualizations how this could look like in the end. Um, but yeah, if you want to dive deeper into the examples, you find the links here also on the board. And how we created this project and so on. We also have some blog articles if you really want to understand what this is all about, how the project was set up, and so on. So there will also be more information available. So now this is as a rough outline of what system mapping is and how it's applied. Um, And yeah, to give you an idea of how these projects can be implemented, we created this process out of the experience we had, for example, the UNDP project and so on. So we thought about, okay, how can we make it easier to get started with system mapping? What are the things which are important to take to the to have in mind when you face some phases of the project and so on. So we put together this process of frame, explore, map, reflect, and leverage, and as kind of a guideline. So it's not a strict process in that sense. It's more an iterative approach also. So in reality, we jump between all these phases during a project. Maybe we have already done a map and then we reflect on it and then we go back to explore and so on and so forth. So, but it can help to have these processes as a guide to not get lost in this complexity when you're working in this project. And to make this actionable, we created the System Mapping Toolkit, which is also available. You find it here. Uh, yeah, you find it on the board. There is the link here. You see it on the right side. But you don't need it for today. But if you want to dive deeper into it, you can uh, also access it via our website, and it's for free so that you can start your own mapping journey. And it's made for Miro. So basically, you could, in this environment, then um, use it. And you see, there's quite some things to it. We try to make it a bit more detailed that it also, the toolkit itself also answers already some questions. So, and to get now into from this meta level of complex systems, system mapping, and so on, to really experience what it actually is, I would now invite you to follow me through the different steps of the mapping process and to just give you a glimpse of what we do there as activities, and then also dive into a short mapping um, exercise together with the group. Maybe before we go there, I hadn't have time to look at the chat. Let me just see. There already. Yeah, it's great to see that there are also, yeah, there are definitely also other system maps around COVID, which is really an interesting topic as we all experienced it. Is the sound, so there is someone who has problems with the sound? Does it work for everyone else? Or is it on my side? Looks like
Um,
it.
I can hear you all right.
Okay, cool. All right. Then I maybe shortly stop the presentation here to give you an overview where we are. Yeah, so this was a bit of a high-level introduction out into methodology and the approaches. You see here, I would now go through these different steps and give you a bit of insight. What are the most important aspects to this? And yeah, then we can get started with our exercise. So let me just go here. Okay. Yeah, so we are in the beginning of the process now, and we called it frame the system. I think maybe everyone knows from a starting point from a project, it's basically you don't have bit not much information about the project, but you want to get started and you need to kind of narrow down where you want to go, what you want to do, and also in system mapping. This is really important to take the time to frame the approach and the what you want to achieve with the system map in, yeah, in detail. Otherwise, you might end up to put a lot of effort into a system map and then it doesn't tell you the things you wanted to explore. And here it's all about creating a system boundary. So thinking about what can be a bit of a limitation where we want to look on in the system, and also create a research question which fits into what you want to find out. And here you see the toolkit which we created in this step. So it's all about discussing context, maybe a problem statement, thinking about a research question, setting goals for the map you want to achieve, and this boundary. And these exercises, at least if we are talking about these system mapping projects, there are mostly participatory elements to it. So we would not do this exercise on our own. We would do it with a client, or even invite experts or people in an organization which then can align on this. So where they want to go, what is exactly the question, and what do they want to have out of these system mapping exercise. And yeah, so the template gives you some prompts, kind of some questions which guide you a bit to this framing phase. And to make it even more tangible, today we brought a small challenge with us, or let's say a small topic which we want to explore, which is what drives positive mood within a department, or maybe also more general, what drives a mood within a department. And we just choose this because every one of us somehow, in some way, has experience with working with other people or working in an organization, and so everyone can yeah, speak from their mind and also think about what are the experiences you had, and creating a system map based on this knowledge today. And just an example of the, these boundary exercise for example here we are doing in this framing. It's basically having the question of if we where do we stop mapping, because the danger in the beginning of when you're creating or when you're starting off to make a system map, it's really dangerous to get paralyzed by all this complexity because you don't know where to start. You could say everything is connected. I don't know how far it should go. I think we should involve this and that, and everyone has a different opinion on that. And so there is a small exercise in the template which is around having or speaking about the boundary and saying, okay, we want to focus in this system map, we want to focus, for example, here on the culture, on the relationships between different departments, on the internal team dynamics, the well-being. It's not maybe not about the suppliers, they are not super important, or the external market dynamics, which have an influence. Of course, they have an influence, but maybe it's not the most important one for you, what you want to explore. So if we want to explore the mood in the department, it's more like an inner organizational challenge. Um, and here it's just important to speak about it and to align with the people who are involved into in the project itself. And there are also other activities in the framing which we do, but you can then also later on have a look at the template and dive deeper into that. But mainly, it's all about building a ground, building alignment, and know roughly where you want to start within the system. Then it's about exploring the system. And this is where all the research and the data is created or collected. So, of course, the system map is only as good as the data which you put into it. And so the question is, where does the data coming from? And how do we translate these data into a system map? And so maybe I just start here. Yeah, so of course it needs data to flourish, as I said. And what we are doing mostly are qualitative interviews for these system mapping projects in combination with studies. So kind of a more quantitative approach in looking at data from studies, but also have qualitative data. But also depending on the project, like today, we are here in the room and we don't have any studies and so on. We are basically just taking the knowledge which is in the room, so which is in this workshop. And this is also what we're doing with clients. If we bring together stakeholders, then the knowledge is created in the moment based on the experience of the people. And yeah, here in this phase, the template looks like the follows. So we have a main variable, we have a place for collecting the variables as all the elements and also to group them. These main variable, I will not get into depth here, but it's mainly a starting point for us. So we try to take the research question and translate it into a variable. So in our case, it's the mood in the department, which is one part, one variable which we are starting with in the system mapping process. It doesn't mean that it's the center later on, but it just helps us to represent the research questions already as one element in the map before we get started. Otherwise, we maybe map something and we are not, in the end, we not even have the variable in there, which is super interesting for us. So that's kind of yeah, as a support to get started, this main variable. And this will get more clear then later on. I show you the example. And then it's about collecting variables, like so collecting now today from the knowledge in the room, we will collect variables, elements where you think are influencing the mood of the department. And we also will try to group them and make a bit of sense out of it. And before we do that, there are just some rules or some things which makes it easier to create system maps which are actually telling you something. And there are just two things which are important if we create these variables. And that's the question of what 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 can what are these variables consisting of? So they can be a lot of things. So it's not only about things you can measure, for example. It's also about things which are maybe intangible, like fear or stress or anxiety about things or motivation about things. So all these elements and variables you think about when you think about the mood in a department can find a place here. So this the causal loop diagram approach is not about placing stakeholders and then make connections. It's more like the in between and the dynamics which you see in the system. But we'll come to that in a second. And if you are naming these variables, it's just good if you have a look at the that they are not defining a direction, let's say. So, and they are not defining, in that case, for example, the level of education. So, low level of education would already give us a direction, but level of education is more flexible. It's variable, so it can increase or decrease. So, it makes the system map much more dynamic if we name the variables in that sense. And also try to be specific. So if we are, for example, here talking about community, it's quite vague what community means for everyone. Maybe it's different. And then to just think about what do you mean if we are speaking about community. In that case, that example here, it could be, for example, sense of belonging. Yes. So also the naming of variable and thinking in variables, there's a bit of a learning curve in the beginning to create these elements and then to connect them. But yeah, I think it's if also a bit about exercising this kind of approach and thinking about data and trying to get these variables out of the data. As more as you're doing it, the easier it gets. So, and this is the first small exercise I would now like to do with everyone in the room. Let's stop the presentation. And so we need data for our system map, which we want to create later on. And for that, we now want to get started collecting a bit of variables. So I will invite you to come here. Maybe I just bring everyone to here. And now let me just look. So we have 40 people in the room. We have 25 on the board. And yeah, so my question to you is, what are the factors, the variables that influence the mood within a department? So from your perspective, what things come into your mind? What have you seen maybe or experienced yourself? And yeah, let's maybe start with one or two of these variables in yeah to put it there. Otherwise, we have maybe too much in the end. But let's just see.
Meanwhile, there's a question. Will the Miro board be available after this presentation?
Yeah, I think I haven't thought about it, but I think yeah, for now it will be accessible later on for everyone who was part of today here. But also in the toolkit, it's basically everything also brought together. So if you then access the toolkit, then you can also copy it directly to your Miro account.
Thank you, Fabian.
All right. So we see there is something happening. Yeah, maybe we can even have one or maybe one variable more if you have an idea about it, and I will shortly see if I can cluster these things, and just that you see how different these approaches can be. So we'll just so I now just have a look and see if there are maybe some clusters which can help us to make a bit more sense out of it. The what? So yeah, it's really interesting to see there's also trust coming up. Mood of others, that's a good one. I think that's also really influential. Maybe we can even take workload or something like this. So there's no right or wrong about how you now would cluster all this, but it really helps to see a bit clearer in all this. Quality of next, definitely. Maybe we could put this to culture, quality of life. Maybe more broader one, social moments, number of influence, feeling inclusive, maybe also culture. So I think we already have some aspects which are quite interesting. Here. So let's have a look shortly, and also on the naming, maybe I could give some comments here. Great. So yeah, we already have in this short amount of time, we have already surfaced some interesting aspects. It doesn't mean we have found all the aspects which are in the system of an organization and which influencing the mood, but we have already gathered different perspectives on it. So you could say this is more, there are more individual aspects, like how much social moments you have with the team, the overall quality of life. I think it also relates then to the working environment, emotional safety in the space, also purpose, how you feel that the work has purposeful in that sense, or do you see it's not making any impact at all, autonomy, so like the really things on the individual level, and you have the environment, like the snacks, which I just saw, I think. Like how the environment of the work is structured, also the physical environment, is it a good place to be, and which is not to be underestimated. Is it maybe light or dark? What are the circumstances there? And of course, the collaboration with others, like the time spent with others. I think also here the remote work is quite interesting. What is the feeling within the team, and how are the teammates doing? So is everyone always complaining, or everyone in a good mood? So here are also a lot of interesting soft factors. And then more on the organization level, like the culture. So is there, what mindset is this organization? Is there a big hierarchy, which maybe has a strong pressure, or um, more a collaborative mindset where everyone works together? Is there a purpose and so on? And if you now look at these, just from the naming that you understand maybe what I meant. So in the easiest thing how to name these variables or how to make them easier to work with is maybe always to take the level, put some defining verbs for it. So level of collaborative mindset, for example, then we can say, okay, is it high or low? Um, then also maybe the level of hierarchy in the uh, lift hierarchy in the organization. So I now just try to make it maybe a bit more clearer. These actually could also be true. So amount of pressure um, within organization. So um, is there high pressure? Is the organization doing well or not? Or is there pressure on the individual people to perform better? Um, then also sense of purpose, we could say, just make it more general. Is there a sense of purpose? Not, um, and so on. So I try to make it a bit more general in some things. Here we could also say level of trust. Good of others works fine, I think. Um, yeah. So you see this amount of level of helps sometimes to make it a bit more clearer, but in the end, it's the most important thing is that everyone in the room understands what we are talking about. So if you are doing this exercise, just yeah, go through them and see if everyone understands what is meant with these topics, especially with things like culture or purpose. What is a purpose, and so on. So we now could get started in discussing what we everyone understands about this, and then maybe find the alignment there. For today, we don't have time for that, but this would be some exercise I would encourage in this phase. Maybe the last one here, the workload. Yeah, so the total volume of work in progress, so how much things are already there, the pressure on people. I think we also have that before somewhere. Work-life balance, deadlines. You could also say the stress level or something like this. And so you see, of course, this is now informed from the biases from all of us in the room and from the experience from all of us in the room. We are, I assume, a quite diverse group of people, but in the end, we are all people who are related to the system, to the SI design hub. So we maybe are also more homogeneous group in the end. So here and across the whole system mapping process, it's quite important to think about who is there, who is in the room, who is not in the room, who can maybe add um, other perspectives to it, as we maybe not covered everything. Um, in the end, it's this exercise of creating a system map is about helping you to understand complex issues better. It will not give you the perfect, we covered everything result in the end. So it will always be and it will have be its flaws. Some things may be missing. You can only strive for a system map which helps you to understand things. And here, for example, we of course we are ha don't have all the elements found, but for today, to make sense for us now in this group about this topic, um, it's totally fine to work with these data now. So now we have kind of the elements. If you remember the nouns of our system map, and now we want to connect them. And in the next step, start to create our map here. And before we dive into that, another short round of input about mapping. And I again use this presentation mode. Yeah, so we now have framed our map. We have explored what data is out there. We have generated variables out of this data. And now we want to bring them into relation and also find these causal structures in our with the system map. And yeah, for the system mapping, it's basically we have this main variable, which I will show you in a second in the template. There's also some parts about clustering, finding feedback, and also highlighting some areas in the map. So this is then when you already have mapped out some things. Here, you see here on the side, we have different steps which lead you through the overall mapping process. For today, we take some shortcuts here. Yeah, you can then have a look at it on the template later on to dive deeper into this. There are just two main elements which I want to talk about a bit more in depth, which are the causal connections. So we now have the elements, like here again, our example from COVID, like people exposed to the virus. This leads is connected to the number of infections and also to the number of infected people. And maybe other example from the fox population. This is the fox population is connected in an environment to the hunting activity and also to the rabbit population. But this doesn't tell us how it's connected. It basically just says that there are, if a change in E is a reason for change in B. So there are connections. If the one changes, the other is also changing, but it doesn't tell us more. And this plus and minus, which is now coming in, or the straight and dotted line, gives us a bit more information about how these things are connected. And yeah, this approach also takes a bit of time to wrap your head around. For today, it's maybe also not super important to do this in the exercise, but I just wanted to give it to you as a thing also to further explore. So we have these connections, and then there are polarities. And these polarities are describe the quality of the causal relationships, so how they are connected. And there is the solid line or the plus, so it's can be both. It means the same, or we have a dotted line and the minus. And it means that if you see a straight line, that the elements move into the same direction. So if the people exposed to the virus is increasing, the infections are also increasing, so the infection rate. Now the thing is, as we are named these variables in a way that they are not going in one direction, we could also say the opposite. We could say if there are less people exposed to the virus, there are less infections. So it only means the direction, so that one element moves into one direction, then the other one moves in the same direction. That this is what it tells us. So it can be a positive in that sense or a negative relationship. If we look at the other example, if we have the dotted line, it goes in different directions. So the hunting activity, if this is high, the rabbit population is low. But we could also say if the hunting activity is low, the rabbit population is high. So you see, the dotted lines basically say it's a different direction where they are influencing it themselves, and the positive polarity is the same direction. It's a bit of confusing at first because, of course, we all think plus is positive and minus is negative. But yeah, so we are working a lot with these dotted and straight lines to avoid this confusion. As I said, this is another detail level which you can work with later on, but in the beginning, it's more about just having these connections is already a good data point and a good information to do. And the last topic, which is important, are feedback loops. They are also a whole big topic for themselves. So I will just touch upon them that you know there are strong dynamics in systems. And these are called feedback loops because they are reinforcing themselves or balancing some dynamics in the system out. So here you see an example for a reinforcing loop that the more contacts of people, the more people are exposed to the virus, there are more infections and more infected people. And so also the contacts of infected people are increasing because there are just more people walking around having this virus. And so this is a reinforcing loop, which is if you don't stop this, it will grow and grow and grow. So it will be kind of an exponential growth dynamic, if you want. Um, but as we are know from our experience in reality, there is no such thing as exponential growth. At some point, there will be some influence which stop this exponential growth, and these are then more balancing feedback loops, which then help the system balance things out. In that case, the population, so the number of population. So you only have X number of people which can be susceptible to this virus. And so there is a limit to it. So the more people are affected, the less people are left over to get infected in the end. And so you see that these exponential curves maybe in this example will rise. So there will a lot of people will be infected, but at some point it will stop and plateau in that sense because of this balancing feedback loop. Like I said, this is also just one principle which is wanted to talk about. Feedback loops have a lot of theory also behind it. And there's a lot of research and things to it. So if you want to dive deeper into that, um, you're welcome to. But for today, this concept is also quite uh, hard to find in the system app sometimes. But you can try if you are in the team, if you already have a map, then if you maybe see the structure of the circles going around, then maybe you have identified some feedback there. That said, I would say this was quite some input on complex things themselves. And now I would like to invite you to get started with the mapping. And I would do it as follows. So we soon will have teams of, let me just check, we have 30 people. Yeah, I think we could maybe do 5 people, but maybe even 4 people per group. So I don't know, Giselle, if this work. So then we have a bit of a smaller group. So maybe teams of 4. And the task or the approach I would now just give you as a guidance is we have these templates here, which you see. So each of the breakout rooms, just pick one of these templates. Maybe you choose the number of your room if that's the most easier thing. And then have a look at the variables which we already provided to you. So you see there is some variables are already provided. I don't know, there are things like stress, productivity, openness between colleagues, and so on. And you already see that there are some similarities to what you found. And just have a look at these variables. And you can also, of course, use some variables which you are elected here. And then it just starts with the question of where do you see things related or connected to the mood of the department? For example, if you say, okay, maybe the stress. So if I'm stressed, there's definitely maybe a connection to the mood in the department. But maybe there is in between also other things which are influencing things. So maybe the time pressure is influencing the stress and the productivity is maybe low. So you can also think about, okay, these maybe are related and the stress is only related to the mood of the department through the productivity. So you could now say the higher the time pressure is, the higher the stress is, and the higher the stress is, the lower the productivity is. So we could do here like a dotted line, and the lower the productivity, the lower the mood in the department. I don't know. This is just as an example how I would now go about it. And it's quite easy and handy with Miro. You can just select these elements. You can also select the post-its and so on, and pull out these blue dots here. And if you click on them, then you get some arrows. And then if you select the arrow, then you can also change the type here in dotted or solid. So this is really basic. Just discuss in the group, think about what things are related, and how do they relate to the mood in the department. And if you have time, think also about maybe there's also the mood in the department, maybe also influences some things back. So you can also from this experience exchange within your team. And so you see there are sometimes then um, creating some of these feedback loops or discovering them. So that's basically it. We have 20 minutes planned so that you also have enough time to get started and think about what things are connected. And yeah, just have a good conversation and have a look at the variables at the beginning and then just try to get started. I think that's also one major learning is just to get started, not be overwhelmed and not think about if it's right or wrong. Just connect things and then discuss, and maybe then you can change it. That's also the nice thing about Miro. So, and with that, I would say, are there any questions not related? We have a part later on for general questions, but now for the exercise or anything before we go into the breakouts. Okay, I would say then let's just get started. Later on, as said, we will have time for more Q&A, also regarding methodology and so on. Okay, this is maybe from a question which is different sizes of the boxes. In that sense, at the moment, this doesn't mean anything. So you can also use post-its as variables and put them there. So for now, this doesn't have any meaning to the thing. And also the distance is not important. So we just try to say, okay, there's an element, they are connected in this way. And that's what we want to create here. So yeah, then I would say let's take 20 minutes for this exercise, and then we see how the energy level is. If we have another break, then after the exercise, let's see. But I would now just get started with the experiment, let's say, in the groups, and then we meet back here in roughly 20 minutes and reflect on it, and then maybe a short break. All right, then I would say. Yeah, please start
Can I open the
the
rooms?
breakout room. Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Christian, if you have already questions, maybe you can ask your teammates. Hopefully, some of you in the team have understand the instruction. But it is basically about taking these variables which we developed here, or taking the variables from here and create the map out of it. There's not more or less. All right, then see you back in a bit, and yeah, have fun.
Hi everyone. Are you able to join the meeting room? I mean the breakout room? Okay. Could we have a timer on the board? I don't have access to create the
Yeah,
timer
I will
on
set
the
it
board.
in a second. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, but this was amazing. And learning about the variables. We use different terms, but variables is amazing.
yeah, that's great. I think it's yeah, of course it takes some time to get into all these topics
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
on, but maybe at least the people have some idea about it, what it means. And yeah, let's see
Makes
what
sense.
they will come up with.
Come up with, yeah.
And yeah, so the break, yeah, let's just see how the energy is when they're coming
Hmm.
back. Maybe we can still make a short break. Time-wise, a bit behind, but should work
Okay.
out.
Makes sense, yeah.
Great. I think there's one person is maybe alone in one group. Maybe Giselle, could you check for the room two?
Okay.
There, if the Bedita
We can send them to
machine.
room number one.
Yeah,
Uh, we have only two people, I think, in the room. Too. I'm enjoying there.
Um,
No.
yep, I've sent them to room number one, I think she said.
Yeah. Maybe moving Karini from room 3. She's alone.
Room number?
I moved room 3.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Let's see.
great. Yeah, now it really looks good. Perfect. All right. I will also
Oh,
take a short break and then see us in a
Sounds
second.
good.
Then I also can join some record rooms, maybe. Let's see.
I think I'll also check with the breakout rooms if they're doing okay.
yeah. I think I am checking the maybe room 6,
Okay, sounds good.
and I am open.
So I'll check with five then.
Okay. Enjoying.
Yeah, okay. All right. So then let's take the last 20 minutes to finalize the process. So now we have created a map, and now it's time to reflect on the map. And this reflection moment, we came up with the word of reflection because we thought that's kind of the feeling we always have if we are in this stage. Because then you have created the map, and then you have to look at it and think maybe where do we maybe have some assumptions put into this, or where is maybe some data missing, and what parts are maybe already really well mapped out. And therefore, in this section here of the template, there are different kind of things like you could collect insights and analyze the map and think about, okay, if this related to that, that's an interesting insight we discussed in the group. And also during the conversations, maybe things came up which you now in this phase can then save or build on. And another important topic here is the storytelling comes in now, because in the end, to reflect the system map, it also helps to show it to others and to ask experts and to get feedback on it. And in order to get feedback on it, you need to explain what they see in the map. And so, in the end, the map itself, if it's a rather complex map, it might be overwhelming for people who have not created it. And so, it really is important to take the visuals now and create some narratives out of it, even if they're just on the surface, but a bit of describing what you mean, what we see in the system. And yeah, so it's kind of a summary of the feedback loops and of the dynamics. And here, just an example. So this is a map also for our case study, which we created, of course, with more time and so on. So it's more elaborated. You also see that it's not easy to create a map in a super fast manner, but you can create a rough sketch in a short amount of time, like 20 minutes. If you would have more time, of course, it gets more elaborated. But what we did now here is that we had a look at the map and asked ourselves questions and reflected on it and tried to identify some area in the map which speak about different things. So, for example, the team culture on the right side. So there's a lot about the trust within the team, the openness, the team vibe, and so on, or the perception of the workplace, the organizational management of the overall organization. So we have created this visual areas to give us a bit more direction and to tell the stories maybe also a bit easier. And here on the left side, you see, for example, for the task management, we then created such a system story or such a story which describes this area. And this is basically, there's also no right or wrong. It's basically just a text. Here, for example, we just wrote down the amount of open tasks can lead to a certain point, increased time pressure and productivity, so that the number of tasks is reduced. However, too much pressure can create stress and also create barriers in productivity. So we just take what we see and what we mapped out and describe it a bit. And this already helps you then to show this map to others, to publish it, maybe even if you want to involve a bigger stakeholder group and so on. And so I think this is a really sometimes not really taken too serious, that we really need to communicate in a narrative way. And so that's why we empathize that this communication part is really important. Otherwise, you most likely end up with having a map and then no one understands it besides the people who created it. And so always think about, if you have this map, how can this be translated to other people? How what are the stories which you see there? And this is then the part for also wrapping up the mapping. And the last and also, let's say, future looking part of of this exercise is identifying leverage points. So if we now have mapped it out and have reflected it, gathered feedback, maybe we adapted some things and have now a map where we say, okay, this is a good enough map for us at the moment. Then it's about finding opportunity fields if this is a goal of the project. And these opportunity fields in the system thinking world are called leverage points. And here again, also the template gives you some hints of how to find leverage points to analyze the map and also dive deeper into how the effects you see of this leverage point in the system. But shortly about what does we mean do we mean with a leverage point? So leverage point in that sense is an area in the system where we see potential for change, where we could intervene with less effort and have a big impact on it. And so these visualizations now gives us the opportunity to look at the map and see the connections and say, okay, if we intervene there, then we would influence all these factors with just one small change, for example. So that's the idea behind this leverage point. And it sometimes can be useful to look at these feedback loops if you identified some, and they can be indicators for this leverage point where because there's really strong dynamics, and so it might be useful to intervene there and to leverage some potential there. And here also there are different approaches on how to identify leverage points and how to go about it. It's again really a big field of system thinking. There are a lot of scholars, a lot of research done. But on our approach, or the interesting approach we found, which is also quite easy to analyze in the map, it's from another guide, which is from the Acumen organization, which they came up with different kinds of analyzing the system map. And here, for example, we then, before we dive into this leverage point, we analyze the map a bit in the questions of where do we see ripple effects, for example, where do we see potential if we intervene there that we have a big ripple effect across the system, or where do we see parts that are really frozen in the system, like I don't know, policy making, for example. If we are an NGO, it might be hard to change government's mind or the policy of a country, so that's might be hard to change, like the frozen part. And also where are potential influences we see and where do we see things already happening positively in the system. So just some questions which gives us a bit of a direction where we maybe see these leverage points. I can say, okay, here stress, this, if we lower the stress, this would be rippling throughout the whole system because it's part of this feedback loop and has it's connected to the productivity and so on. And with this tool as analyzing framework, we then maybe come up with some leverage points here, like stress relief would be an area where we could work on and then brainstorm in the next stage, or go into a design thinking process and think about, okay, how can we relieve stress in our department? Or here on the upper right side, maybe the trust is one leverage point we identified, and we could think about how to improve the trust there. On the organizational level, it could be the culture of celebration, success, will have more positive effects on it, and so on and so forth. So also these leverage points can be on different levels, like on the individual level, but also on organizational level and so on. And with that, the process of system mapping, at least the process which we created, stops. So we are closing the system mapping process with the leverage part, because from here now onwards, you basically can think about an innovation project. You can create design thinking processes and so on and so forth. So it's more about idea generation and less about mapping. So the map basically has given us these insights ideally, which we now draw from and which we can identify insights and these leverage points and then move on. And if you now ask yourself, again, from the design perspective, so where does this make sense? So where does system mapping make sense to be implemented in the design or innovation process? Here, just as a last slide, I think from our perspective, there are totally different approaches to it. So we could say system mapping is a starting point. So if you're doing user research or if you're doing quantitative research, you could use system mapping as a tool to bring together all the knowledge and to make sense out of the complexity in terms of understanding. So really using it in the discovery and understanding phase. You could use it as also in the discovery and define stage. So if you are, for example, conducting user research, including besides creating maybe user journey or something like this, also including a high-level system map, and with that have more the system perspective in your design process and not only the perspective user. And ideally, of course, you could use system mapping as accompanying the whole process, so starting with a map and then defining and refining it along the way till prototyping phase and so on and so forth. So there are plenty of options how to implement it, but I would say it's kind of a addition to having the user or the human-centered perspective, having the system perspective, and bring it in and jump in between kind of these perspectives that really enriches the outcome of such innovation processes. And with that, from the input side, I'm finished and we have still some time left. And before maybe there are still open questions and so on, I would like to give you some overview about what you could do now next. And if you are interested in the topic, because this webinar obviously was just like some input, but we didn't have the time to go deeper into it. So there are plenty of options you could go for. So we as a System Mapping Academy, we have created overall training, again, also based on our toolkit here, which is a more extensive training from 3 days in across like 12 hours roughly, and going really into depth. Also have a lot of case studies and so on in there. So check it out if you want to learn more in depth about system mapping here. There you also see what the training entails. And then the question, of course, arises, what about AI? Because also complexity in AI actually can go really well together depending on how we approach it. So there's also a webinar which we are hosting in end of July. And here you can register or look at a blog article from our side, also a bit more critical perspective on usage of AI. So it's also really interesting. Every day technology is changing and gives us more and more opportunity to also create system maps and help us there in the process of untangling these complexity. And also from together in our collaboration with the SI Design Hub, we will also have a systemic design workshop, so which is a bit more broader looking at the term of systemic design. So it's going a bit beyond system mapping. And there you will find soon an event in the system innovation calendar on the 22nd of July, where we also run a workshop, give you some insights into further methodologies there. So from trainings to webinars, there is a lot of opportunity to learn and dive deeper into the topic of system mapping and overall the combination of systems and design. So we would be happy to see you at some of these occasions then in the next time. And yeah, with that, I would say I would hand over to Roma. We also maybe have time for some questions, like 5 minutes for those who are yeah, have open things they want to discuss. So I can also stay a bit longer if there are any pressing things. But yeah, for now, I would say handing over to Roma to round it up for today.
Thank you so much, Fabian. This was amazing. There was so much that I got to learn. I'm sure everybody enjoyed the last 2 hours. Any questions before I move on for wrap up, or anything that you want to mention about the workshop? Any key takeaways?
There is a question in the chat from Anna. What are the main barriers you encounter and would advise us to anticipate when trying a more systemic approach? I think in terms of really pragmatic barriers, at least from my experience, are that it takes time to go on a system level. So if you're an organization and there might be some hesitation to take the time to bring together stakeholders, bring together people, and take the time to look at a complex issue with this group, for example. So there, we have made the experience that sometimes there need to be arguments and thinking about why this is really useful. I think everyone who is working with system thinking knows how beneficial it is to connect the overall dots we see and get the bigger picture. But sometimes we have to convince people in the organization. So that's, I think, one barrier in the end. But yeah, from our experience, it helps really show examples and make clear what these, if it's system mapping or other systemic approaches, what are the benefits which comes out of it, even though they take a bit of time to dive into and to exchange and so on. But on the long run, the system perspective is, yeah, really can help to leverage yeah, huge potential in the organization, for example.
Thank you, Fabian and team.
Mm.
Like the structured approach of systems thinking, would like to experiment and explore more. Very interesting and helpful. From Shubedita. Is there anybody who wanted to say something? I just heard someone unmute. Okay, Giselle, if you'd like to wrap up.
Okay, guys. So I share here on the chat a link for you to share your feedback. We'd love to know about our feedback for our sessions today. So how would you hate the overall experience in today's session? So here you can dot and share your experience here in the line. And feel free to share to join in our official channels, in our LinkedIn page and YouTube channel. This session will record and will be available in our hub space and YouTube channel as well. So thank you again, guys. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for your participation and also sticking with the energy here in the afternoon. Yeah, it's really nice to meet you all. And yeah, maybe see you soon in other formats like these.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys. Thank you, team.
Fabian, would you like us to stay back for any discussion, or
Yeah,
we close
maybe
it for a minute?
um,
Okay.
I think there are no more questions, but maybe we can just align on make a short debrief there.
Sergio, Elena, do you have questions? Okay. Awesome.
Got a great feedbacks here.
So, yeah, can also stop the recording.